Bernard Tobin at the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association meeting here. We're at MicroSmart taking a deep dive into micronutrients, and I'm joined now by Dr. Luke Gatiboni from North Carolina State University. Sir, how are you doing? Welcome to Canada.
Oh, thank you. I'm doing very well. Thank you for the invitation, Bernard. And it's a pleasure talking about micronutrients in this event for the Ontario.
Now, let's talk about micronutrients, but let's also talk about macronutrients. The macros and the micros. How do you define them, and I guess the impact they can make on the crop?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, this is a definition like an academic definition. Macro and micronutrients. They are all nutrients that are essential for plants, and so the first thing that is important, if you are lacking of any of these nutrients, regardless that is macro or micro, the plant will not survive because they need that. But this difference is because some nutrients we need a high quantity, and so the macronutrients are the ones that we can measure in a percentage in the plant. And we have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulphur. These six we consider macronutrients, and so they are in high quantity in the plant. They are part of tissues, and this is the reason that they are very common in terms of the quantity inside the plant. The micronutrients, we cannot measure them in percent because the concentration of them is very, very small. If you sum up all micronutrients that we have, and you have a bunch of them, and I can name iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, chlorine, nickel, and molybdenum, all of them together will be less than 0.03% of the plants in terms of amount. And so, but they are not less important than the macronutrients. For example, if we don't have one of these micros, the plant cannot survive. And the reason for them to be in very small quantities is because in general they are not associated with the tissue of the plants. They are doing some specific activity inside the plant, like they are part of an enzyme or they are activated a protein, and they do very, very specific work, jobs inside the plant, but they are as essential as nitrogen. That is a huge part of the plant.
Now, is it typical that we have enough of the micronutrients as a soil reserve, and how does that happen when we get a situation where we have a deficiency?
Yeah, that's true. It's less common to have deficiency of micros just because the plants need small amounts. And so when you think that we have some nutrients available in the soil, because we have these micros, most of them will come from the parent material, the rocks that form the soil. And so we have some of them in the soil. As the plant removes very tiny amounts every year, we have a reserve of these nutrients that can last many decades. And so, but at some point we can run out of these micros, and these are the times where we start to see issues with micronutrients. Another thing that can affect this, some of these micronutrients, they are highly affected by pH, for example. And when you are out of a normal range of pH, we start to see deficiencies because sometimes we have the micronutrients available in the soil, but they are not available for the plant.
Is it possible to predict a deficiency? I mean, is there a way that we could... I mean, we'll talk about soil testing and plant tissue testing a little later on, but can we see them coming? Yeah, we have a way to at least predict what would be fields that probably or are more likely to have problems. And the first thing would be the soil texture. As these micronutrients are coming from the parent material, when they dissolve from the rocks, from the parent material, the clays of the soil will retain these micronutrients, and so they will last for a long time. If you don't have clays, if you are in a sandy soil, we have the decomposition of the parent material, but we don't have a clay to tie up the micronutrients, and so they will be leached out from the soil. In these sandy soils, we are more likely to see problems because you don't have a big reserve of micros. Another thing that can help
is organic matter, because the same way as clays, we have the organic matter that can retain and hold these micronutrients. If I'm in a situation where we have low organic matter, I have more ability to see some deficiencies because I don't have enough reserves in the soil. And so soil texture, sandy soils, and low organic matter are the ones that we really can predict that can be problems for microbes in general. Another thing that is important is pH. When we have excessively high pH, and I mean talking about soils with pH above 7, 7.5, something like that, we start to see deficiencies of manganese, zinc, copper, and iron. And so in this situation where we have high pH, it's likely that some micronutrients could be a problem.
When you look at the impact of a deficiency, I mean, talk about some of the crops, whether it's soybeans, corn. I know you've done a lot of work with tobacco as well. What type of impact can we be making when we don't have sufficient reserves, availability of those microbes?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, when you think about the impact in terms of yield reduction from the microbes, is not the same impact in general as you see for macronutrients. For example, if you do not apply nitrogen for corn, you cannot have any yield. Micronutrients, in general, the soil can provide some, but not all that the plant needs. And so what we see is a reduction in yield. Sometimes it will be 20-30% of the yield in reduction. That is quite a lot. But in general, you won't see, your field just dead because lack of micronutrients. But and the interesting thing about this is that sometimes you do not see any problem in your field because we have this hidden hunger that we have a little bit less microbes that we should have in the soil, and so the plant seems healthy, your field is good, but we have a reduction, maybe 5-10 bushels per acre, just because you don't have enough of that microbe. The plant seems healthy, but sometimes you have some limiting factor, and adding some of these microbes sometimes will give you those extra 5-10 bushel.
Let's talk about how we identify those deficiencies. You talked about soil testing and plant tissue testing, the two best ways to go about that.
Yeah. For sure. The first thing that we need to do is we need to get the soil testing, because soil testing is the best way to learn about your field, to see what's the background fertility that we have. And so this is the first step of a management of soil fertility. But it's not enough, because sometimes we have some of these processes in the soil. For example, we have manganese in the soil, but the manganese is not available, and the soil testing cannot get that. And so the plant tissue testing will help you to identify those things that the soil analysis cannot tell you. And so you can work in both of them. The soil analysis will be the first step to learn about your system, and the plant analysis will help you to identify or fine-tune your fertilization program. We have other tools, for example, visual diagnosis, and of course when you are scouting your field, just walking through the field and you see plants that do not seem doing well. We have a lot of information available online that we can help you to identify if those symptoms sometimes are associated with micronutrients. And so it will be like a red flag. You are seeing that the plant is not doing well, maybe it's time to get some plant tissue and send to the lab for analysis. And so you can identify what's not going well with the plant.
Now, final question for you, and that is about micros. I mean, we've heard more and more about them in recent years. The focus obviously was on macros. Is this a trend, or is this just a sort of an awakening of understanding of soil fertility and interaction with plants?
I think it's both. I think when you think about it's a trend in the way that we are increasing yields of our fields, and so we are exporting more nutrients in general. And so you can imagine that over time with agriculture, if you are exporting more grain, you are exporting more of these microbes. If you are not replenishing them, at some point we will see some deficiency. And so this is one way to look at this. This is one way that micros are, are in the spotlight right now. And the second thing is just because we took a lot of time working with macros, because every year we see that we need them and you are applying, that now if you want the extra bushels from your field, is the time to do the fine tune of your fertilization. That would be the macros that could give you those extra bushels for high yielding fields.
Well, Dr. Gatiboni, it's been great chatting with you. Appreciate you taking some time for Real Agriculture.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. This is great talking to you. Thank you very much.